great to be here in Treynor. Marianne, I want to thank you and Charlie for your friendship, your support, for rallying for us, and for believing in us. We appreciate that. So what a great room. I want to first ask, how many of you are hearing me speak at a town hall for the first time? I should have asked how many of you have already heard me speak. Where have y'all been? It's great to see so many new friends. I appreciate it. We're going to have fun tonight. We're going to talk about, I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself. Then we're going to talk about where we are in our country. And then we're going to talk about how to save her. So I was born and raised in a small rural southern town. 2,500 people, 2 stoplights. You couldn't think about doing something wrong without somebody already telling your mom. I grew up playing on a cotton field and at a dairy farm. And my mom started a business out of the living room of our home. 30 plus years later, it was a successful company. I started doing the books for the family business when I was 13. It wasn't until I got to college that I realized that was child labor. I'm not an Ivy Leaguer. I went to a public university. I went to Clemson University. Go Tigers. I graduated with a degree in accounting. Accountants are problem solvers. And then I went on and worked in the corporate world for a while. And I came back home to the family business. And one day I happened to be sitting with my mom, telling her how hard it was to make $1 and how easy it was for government to take it. And my mom said, quit complaining about it, do something about it. I truly did not know you weren't supposed to run against a 30-year incumbent in a primary. Ignorance is bliss. Once I realized he was related to half the district, the only option was to win. And so I went around the district and said, we have way too many lawyers at the State House. I think they need a really good accountant. And the district took a chance on me, and we won. When I got to the State House, my focus was on small businesses. I have always believed small businesses are the heartbeat of our economy. And so that's what I tried to fight for when I was there. After 3 or 4 years of being there, something really came to light that had always been there. South Carolina typically voted on things by a voice vote. All in favor, say aye. All opposed, nay. The ayes have it. But one day, there was a bill that was read across the desk that would give legislators a pay raise. All in favor, say aye. All opposed, silence. The ayes have it, yet to this day you can't find anyone that says they voted themselves a pay raise. I was furious because we had a Republican House, a Republican Senate, and a Republican governor. And so I filed a bill that said anything important enough to be debated on the floor of the House or the Senate is important enough for people to know how their legislators voted. And the Speaker of the House said, put the bill away. We don't need to have it. We will decide what the public needs to see and what they don't. Long story short, after I wouldn't put the bill away, after I fought to tell everybody in South Carolina what was going on, they stripped me of everything. I lost all my seniority. I lost my committee assignments. I could take the well. No one would hear me speak. I could sponsor a bill. No one would co-sponsor. So I ran for governor. I ran as the Tea Party candidate, and I am proud to say that one of the first bills we signed into law is now in South Carolina. Anything important enough to be debated on the floor of the House or the Senate requires a legislative vote on the record, and we took it a step further and did it on every section of the budget. And you were listening to my playlist. I hope you liked it, but I love music. And so on the day of the bill signing, we blasted throughout the State House Pat Benatar's Hit Me With Your Best Shot. When I became governor, South Carolina was hurting. We had 11% unemployment. We had thousands of people on welfare, and South Carolina was the butt of the jokes. So we got to work. By the time I left, we were building planes with Boeing. We were building more BMWs than any place in the world. We brought in Mercedes-Benz. We brought in Volvo, 5 international tire companies, and they were referring to us as the beast of the Southeast, which I love. We announced jobs in every county in the state. We moved the 11% unemployment down to 4% and turned South Carolina into an economic powerhouse. But we also acknowledged some truths. We said if you have to show picture ID to buy Sudafed, You have to show picture ID to get on a plane. You should have to show picture ID to protect the integrity of the election process. We passed voter ID in South Carolina. We passed one of the toughest illegal immigration laws in the country. We passed tort reform. We busted on the unions when they tried to stop us from building planes in South Carolina. We filled our coffers with savings. We paid down our debt. And by the time I left, South Carolina was named the friendliest state in the country, the most patriotic state in the country, and the number 2 state in the country people were moving to. And then I got the call for the United Nations. And my honest answer was, I don't even know what the UN does. I just know everybody hates it. I wasn't wrong about that. But when I went into the UN, I wanted countries to know what America was for and what America was against. I didn't care if they didn't like me, but I wanted them to respect America. And so we got to work. We pulled ourselves out of the Iran deal. We pulled ourselves out of the Human Rights Council and out of the Paris Climate Agreement. We stopped any U.S. taxpayers going to the Palestinian Refugee Organization. We moved our embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. I negotiated 4 different sets of sanctions packages against North Korea by pushing China to go along with it. But the best thing that we did was we took the kick me sign off of our backs, and America was respected again at the UN. Now I'm running for president, and I don't need to tell you how bad things are. You don't have to turn on the news to see it. You feel it when you go to the grocery store. You feel it when you fill up your car with gas. You feel it when you make your mortgage payment, your insurance payment, everything that we have to pay for, it's all gone up. And I would love to tell you that Biden did that to us. And listen, he sent us on this roller coaster of socialism that's dangerous, that we have to put an end to. But I've always spoken in hard truths, and I'm going to do that with you tonight. Our Republicans did that to us too. You go back and look at that $2.2 trillion COVID stimulus bill that they passed with no accountability. They expanded welfare that has now left us with 100 million Americans on Medicaid, 42 million Americans on food stamps. That's a third of our country. And did Republicans try and make it right? Nope. They doubled down and opened up earmarks and pet projects for the first time in 10 years, pushing through 7,000 of them last December. Want to know how they spent your money? $30 million on an honors college in Vermont, $10 million to tear down a hotel in Alaska, $7.5 million on a courthouse in Colorado, and the list goes on. In the 2024 appropriations budget, Republicans put in $7.4 billion worth of pet projects and earmarks. Democrats put in $2.8 billion. Now you tell me who the big spenders are. All while 1 in 6 American families can't pay their utility bill. 60% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. 50% of American families can't afford diapers. Homelessness has gone up 12%. Over 650,000 Americans are homeless now. Social Security will go bankrupt in 10 years. Medicare will go bankrupt in 8. Then you look at our education system. Everybody wants to blame COVID for education. Nope. We had problems with education before COVID. Do you know right now in America, only 31% of 8th graders in this country are proficient in reading? 31%. Only 27% of 8th graders are proficient in math. If we don't do something about this, we're going to be in a world of hurt 10 years from now. And then you look at our border situation. I've literally run out of things to say about it. It is the biggest dereliction of duty you can imagine. And I've been to the border. And I didn't go pull a Kamala and come back. I went 400 miles down that border. You're not ready for what I saw. mounds of clothes, mounds of shoes, paraphernalia, rape areas that the women and girls have to walk through. When you get up in the morning, you get your coffee and you watch the news. When these ranchers get up in the morning, they get their coffee and they go see if someone died crossing the fence. They pick up whatever little kids were left behind and they turn them over to Border Patrol. I met with multiple sheriffs. They said before 7 a.m. they round up whatever illegal immigrants they can find. They turn them over to Border Patrol. Border Patrol documents them and releases them until their court date years from now. And when I asked Border Patrol about their job, they said, you want to know what we do? We're glorified babysitters. They don't let us do our job. 8 million illegal immigrants have come to that border. We had enough fentanyl cross the border last year that would kill every single American. Number one cause of death for adults 18 to 45? Fentanyl. And don't think for a second China doesn't know what they're doing when they send it over. And then my parents always taught me, you take care of those who take care of you. I'm going to ask you if we're taking care of those who take care of us. Right now in America, over 35,000 of our veterans are homeless. 1 in 3 veterans suffers from PTSD or thoughts of suicide. We lose 22 heroes a day to suicide. If a veteran needs a doctor's appointment, on average, it takes 29 days. Why 29 days? Because on the 30th day, they can go to the doctor or hospital of their choice. So midway through the 29 days, they get a call to reschedule. And the clock starts all over again. It's shameful how we treat our veterans. And then you turn on the news, and what does Congress do? They love to get up and talk. But what have they done for you lately? Nothing, right? You know, on average, well, first of all, Congress is always, their number one job is to pay for government. Do you know they've only given us a budget on time 4 times in 40 years? 4 times. I think we start with, first of all, saying, you don't get us a budget on time, you don't get paid. It's time we start holding them to the... And don't you think we finally need term limits in D.C.? It's long past time. And don't you think we should have mental competency tests for anyone over the age of 75? Now let me say this. I'm not being disrespectful when I say that. We all know people who are over 75 that can run circles around us. I mean, look at Senator Grassley. Like, there's nothing that man can't do. But then you've got Joe Biden. But think about it. I don't care if you do these for 50 and up. But these are people who are making decisions on our national security. These are people making decisions on the future of our economy. We need to know they're at the top of their game. And right now, the Senate's the most privileged nursing home in the country. We need to seriously start looking at who we're sending up there. So that's a lot of bad, right? It's hard to find anything good. But now I'm going to tell you what I told South Carolina when I became governor. No more whining. No more complaining. Now we get to work. How do we fix it? When it comes to the economy, let's start by clawing back the $100 billion of unspent COVID dollars that are out there. Instead of 87,000 IRS agents going after middle America, let's go after the hundreds of billions of dollars of COVID fraud. 1 out of every $7 was spent fraudulently. If 8% of our budget is interest, quit borrowing. Cut up the credit cards. You have to balance a budget every day. I had to balance a budget as governor. Why is Congress the only group that refuses to balance a budget? Do you know right now 70% of federal employees are still working from home 3 years after COVID? Do you know over 75% of most of our agencies are still sitting empty? We're paying for that. Something's got to give. I think it's time we have an accountant in the White House. I'm just saying. We will stop the spending, we'll stop the borrowing, we'll eliminate the earmarks, and I will veto any spending bill that doesn't take us back to pre-COVID levels. That will save us trillions. And then we're going to go and take as many federal programs as we can and move them down to the states. That will reduce the size of the federal government, but it will empower people on the ground. Think welfare, think health care, think education. Wouldn't you much rather have it closer to the people than have some D.C. bureaucrats managing it? And then let's open up the middle class. Bless you. Right now, the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer. We need to let the middle class breathe. That's why we're going to eliminate the gas and diesel tax in this country. We're going to cut taxes on the middle class. We're going to simplify those brackets. And we're going to make the small business tax cuts permanent. They made the corporate tax cuts permanent, but they made the small business tax cuts temporary. They're the heartbeat of our economy. We make those small business tax cuts permanent. When we start to do those things, that's when we'll start to see our economy get back on track. When we start to really focus on our debt and our spending and look at it as a taxpayer dollar and not a dollar that just pumps out of a machine. Then when it comes to education, we knew in South Carolina if a child couldn't read by third grade, they were 4 times less likely to graduate high school. So rather than pushing those kids forward, we started holding those kids back. We brought in their parents. We did reading remediation programs, and we set them up for success. We need to do that across our country. We have got to get our kids reading again. And no parent should ever wonder what's being said or taught to their child in the classroom. We need complete transparency in the classroom. As a parent, we have one job, and that's to make sure that we do the best for our kids. That's why we need to let parents decide what method of education their child should get. Every child deserves a good education, regardless of where they're born and raised. No child should be mandated based on a zip code. And then let's start building things in America again. Let's put vocational classes back into our high schools. In South Carolina, we had apprenticeships. We taught our kids how to build the things we were making. That way you get them invested in our economy before they even finish. And then a point of personal privilege. For all you girl dads out there and you strong moms, we have to raise strong girls. Strong girls become strong women. Strong women become strong leaders. And none of that happens if you have biological boys playing in girls' sports. That's got to come to an end. And when it comes to the border, we will take what we did in South Carolina and we'll go national with it. We will do a national E-Verify program that requires every business to prove that the people they hire are in this country legally. We will defund sanctuary cities once and for all. No more safe havens for illegals. We'll put 25,000 Border Patrol and ICE agents on the ground and let them do their job. We will go back to the Remain in Mexico policy so that no one processes, even touches the U.S. soil. And instead of catch and release, we're going to go to catch and deport. That's the way we'll stop the bleeding that's happening at the border. And when it comes to our veterans, we've all seen the images when our men and women deploy and the tears that are shed. And then we see the images when prayers are answered, God willing, and those men and women come back home to us safely. I'm the wife of a combat veteran. My husband deployed to Afghanistan. When he came back home to us, it was a lot of prayers answered. But that was the easy part. The hard part's when we got home. Michael couldn't hear loud noises. He couldn't be in crowds. Life had passed him by for the year that he was gone, and the transition was tough. We can't just love our men and women when they're gone. We got to love them when they come back home, too. And you got to do better than just a 2-week transition. We need to give them what they need whenever they need it. And that means we should have telehealth services so that they can get mental health care in real time. They should be able to go to the doctor or hospital of their choice. They've earned that right. And when it comes to veteran health care, I think the best way to deal with it is I think every member of Congress should have to get their health care from the VA. And you watch how fast that gets fixed. Trust me, it will be the best health care you've ever seen, guaranteed. And there were 2 things when I was at the United Nations that Russia, China, and Iran never wanted America to have. They never wanted us to have a strong military, and they never wanted us to be energy independent. We won't be energy independent, we'll be energy dominant. We need to turn our energy sector into the economic powerhouse we know it can be. That includes biofuels. That means getting the EPA out of the way. They care more now about sagebrush lizards than they do about whether we can afford our power bill. We need to speed up our permitting process. We need to make sure we do the Keystone Pipeline. We need to export as much liquefied natural gas as we can. We need to support the renewable fuel standard. And we need to make sure that we focus on what our energy needs are. You know, Biden basically went and depleted our reserves because the polls were telling him it was bad. We're in trouble if we have a crisis because now they're at the lowest levels they've been in 30 years. We need to make sure no more going hat in hand to Saudi Arabia, no more getting dirty oil from Iran or Venezuela. We'll make sure that we're energy dominant. So those are the domestic side of things. We know what we need to do to get our country back on track. Now let's talk about national security. The world is literally on fire. You've got a war in Europe. You've got a war in the Middle East. North Korea just tested an intercontinental ballistic missile that can reach the United States. We've got China on the march. But make no mistake, none of that would have happened had we not had that debacle in Afghanistan. The idea that my husband and his military brothers and sisters had to watch us leave Bagram Air Force Base in the middle of the night without telling our allies who stood shoulder to shoulder with us for decades because we asked them to be there. Think about what that told our friends. More importantly, think about what that said to our enemies. And now what are you getting out of Congress? They're saying, do you support Ukraine or do you support Israel? Do you support Israel or do you secure the border? Don't let them lie to you like that. Don't let them give you those options because that's a false premise. They need to tell you the truth. Let's pull it back and I'll tell you one by one. Let's start with Ukraine. You should know when I was at the United Nations that Ukraine was a great friend to us. They voted with us on just about everything. They supported every initiative we did, no questions asked. Here you have a pro-American, freedom-loving country that was invaded by a thug. And 500,000 people have died because of Putin. Now, everybody wants to see this war come to an end, right? The war would be over if Russia got out. If Ukraine stopped fighting, they'd lose their country. And so look at what's happened to Russia. First of all, to be very clear, I don't think we should ever send cash to any country because you can't follow it and you can't hold it and make sure it's being spent the right way. I don't think we need to put troops on the ground in Ukraine. They don't want our troops. They want to win this on their own. but I do think we give them the equipment and the ammunition to win. Ukraine has an amazing military fighting force. Russia has hit rock bottom. We know that because they've lost 87% of the troops that started this war. They now have raised the draft age in Russia to 65. They're getting drones from Iran and missiles from North Korea. Now, anybody that asks the question, why should we care about Ukraine? That's a legitimate question to ask. Why should we care about Ukraine? Because I know every day at the United Nations, thugs, terrorists, and dictators always tell you what they're going to do. They're actually incredibly transparent. Hamas said they were going to go into Israel, and they did. China said they were going to take Hong Kong. We watched it. Russia said they were going to invade Ukraine. It happened. China says Taiwan is next. We better believe them. Russia said once they take Ukraine, listen carefully, Poland and the Baltics are next. If that happens, America's at war because those are NATO countries. This is about preventing war. The other candidates are sitting there saying I'm a warmonger. Are you kidding? My husband's in the military. The last thing I want him to do is go fight. This is about preventing war. We should always be looking to prevent war. And remember, Russia and China held hands before Russia did that invasion and told the world they were unlimited partners. A win for Russia is a win for China. Now, if we support Ukraine, that's only 3.5% of our defense budget. That's it, 3.5%. The Europeans have put in more than that, and they should. It's their neighborhood. Now let's go to Israel. I'm haunted by what happened on October 7th. The reason why I'm haunted is 5 years ago I gave a speech at the UN. And I told the world that we knew there were maps. And these maps were held by Hamas. And it showed that if they could get through the barrier, this is how they were going to kill as many Jews as fast as they could. And it happened. When people say, why do we need to help Israel? God help us if we don't get this right. Israel's a bright spot in a tough neighborhood. They're the tip of the spear when it comes to defeating terrorism. It has never been that Israel needs America. It has always been that America needs Israel. And remember, on October 7th, when Hamas came in and beheaded those people and burned those babies alive and raped those girls at the concert and dragged their naked bodies through the streets of Gaza, what did they say? Death to Israel, death to America. That's what we have to remember. That's why it matters. And you've got other candidates saying, this isn't our war, this is Israel's war. You know what? This should be personal for us. 33 Americans were butchered on October 7th. There are American hostages now as we speak. When it comes to Israel, we should do three things. Give them whatever support they need whenever they need it. Eliminate Hamas. Finish them once and for all. If we don't, they'll do this again. And do whatever it takes to get our hostages home. But Biden's got to stop sitting there saying, I'm your friend, but I really don't mean it. I saw this at the United Nations so many times. Everybody runs to Israel when she's hit. And they're always quick to beat up on her when she hits back. If that had happened to us, you can bet we would have hit back, and hard. Let me make another connection. Remember I told you Putin hit rock bottom? On October 7th, when Hamas went into Israel, October 7th is Putin's birthday. Who's the happiest man in the world right now? Putin. Why? Because the U.S. and the West moved our eyes from Ukraine over to Israel. And that's exactly what they wanted. Did Putin call Netanyahu on October 8th? No. He waited 10 days to call. Do you know who he did call? He called Hamas, invited them to Russia, and held hands and named themselves friends. We now know that it was the Russian intelligence that showed them how to get through the barrier in Israel. That's the connection. If we support Ukraine and we support Israel, that's only 5% of our defense budget. Now, the other option they're saying is securing the border. That should be priority number one. We have got to secure our borders above everything else because that's national security. The one job we should always do is keep Americans safe. And America right now is acting like it's September 10th. We better remember what September 12th felt like. It only takes one. So if we support Ukraine and support Israel and secure our border, that's less than 20% of Biden's green subsidies. So don't let them tell you we can't do that. They have to make sure our national security is number one. They have to. Now let's talk about our number one national security threat, China. China has been planning war with us for years, and that's not an exaggeration. They're already here. They've already infiltrated our country. They have 400,000 acres of U.S. soil, most recently near Grand Forks Air Force Base, where our most sensitive drone technology is. We now see they have millions of dollars that are going into our universities, stealing our research, spreading Chinese propaganda. They've bought the largest pork producer in the country right here in Iowa. They've killed more Americans with fentanyl than the Iraq, Afghanistan, and Vietnam wars combined. 75,000 Americans last year alone. Everybody was upset when the Chinese spy balloon went over our country, right? Rightfully so. What about the fact that 90% of our law enforcement drones are Chinese? Think about all the mini surveillance that's happening. They have Chinese police stations throughout our country. They put up a spy base with Cuba off our shores. We can never let them get military and put Chinese military at that base. There's certain technologies that strengthen their military and threaten us. Yet the Biden administration approved 70% of those last year. The Trump administration approved more than that. And then China's building up their military at a scary pace. They have 500 nuclear warheads. That's 100 more than they had last year. They have the largest naval fleet in the world. They have 370 ships. They'll have 400 ships in 2 years. We won't even have 350 ships in 2 decades. They're doing artificial intelligence. They're doing cyber. They're doing space. They've developed hypersonic missiles. We've barely gotten started. And now China's the lead developer of neurostrike weapons. Weapons engineered to change the brain activity of our military commanders and segments of the population. That's who we're dealing with. So when Biden and Yellen tell you that China's a competitor, I dealt with China every day at the United Nations. They never saw us as a competitor. They always saw us as an enemy. We've got to look at them the way they look at us. So how do we deal with China? First of all, we stop selling any U.S. soil and we take back the land they already purchased. We go to our universities and we say, you either take foreign money or you take American money, but the days of taking both are over, and we get that infiltration out of our universities. We blacklist every bit of that technology that builds up their military and hurts us. And then we go to China and we say, we are going to end all normal trade relations with you until you stop murdering Americans with fentanyl. You watch how fast they move. They need our economy. And when it comes... And when it comes to our military, we need to strengthen our military. Strong military doesn't start wars. A strong military prevents wars. Always. But that doesn't mean you throw a bunch of money at the Department of Defense. It actually means you clean it up. You get rid of the bureaucracy. You get rid of the red tape. You get rid of all these extra programs that they don't need to be involved in, and you modernize. You've got generals right now focused on old wars. Yes, land, air, sea, but what we need to be focusing on is artificial, cyber, space, hypersonic missiles, submarines. We've got to be looking forward, not back. And for goodness sake, we have got to stop having the military teach these gender pronoun classes to our military. It's demoralizing to them. So now let's make a further connection. There's a reason the Taiwanese want the U.S. and the West to support Ukraine. Because they know if Ukraine wins, China won't invade Taiwan. There's a reason the Ukrainians want the U.S. and the West to support Israel. Because the Ukrainians know if Iran wins, Russia wins. Russia, China, and their junior partner Iran are in an unholy alliance, and they are bound together by their hatred for freedom, the West, and of all things, America. We have to wake up to what's happening. We can take it on. We can deal with it. But you don't deal with it by putting your head in the sand. You don't deal with it like Biden's doing by letting these drones go and strike our men and women in Syria and Iraq and not do anything about it. You don't do it by letting these drones hit these ships that are in the Red Sea right now. The more they do it, the more they're going to think they can do it. You punch them back once and you punch them back hard, and they will completely back off. It's always been that way about Iran. Remember, there would be no Hamas without Iran. There would not be the Houthis without Iran. There would not be Hezbollah without Iran. This is all Iran's dirty work. We just have to start realizing that it's strength that will win the day. And in order to do that, we have to stop this national self-loathing that has taken over our country. The idea that they say America's bad or rotten or racist. I was elected the first female minority governor in history. America's not racist, we're blessed. Our kids need to know to love America. They need to be saying the Pledge of Allegiance when they start school every day. You know, I dropped my husband Michael off at 4 a.m. 5 months ago for another year-long deployment. And I watched him and 230 soldiers pick up their 2 duffel bags of belongings to go to a country they'd never been, all in the name of protecting America. They're willing to sacrifice their lives and their families because they still believe in this amazing experiment that is America. So if they're willing to fight for us there, shouldn't we be willing to fight for America here? Because we have a country to save. But in order to do that, we've got to acknowledge some hard truths. Republicans have lost the last 7 out of 8 popular votes for president. That is nothing to be proud of. We should want to win the majority of Americans. But the only way we're going to do that is if we have a new generational leader and we leave the negativity and the baggage behind. Another hard truth. I think President Trump was the right president at the right time. I agree with a lot of his policies. I had a good working relationship with him. But rightly or wrongly, chaos follows him. You know I'm right. Chaos follows him. And we can't have a country in disarray and a world on fire and go through 4 more years of chaos. You don't fix Democrat chaos with Republican chaos. Do you remember when you were growing up? Do you remember how simple life was? Do you remember how safe it felt? It was about faith, family, and country. Your parents raised you to be responsible individuals. You went to school and you learned what you needed to be successful. You went to church and you found your faith and your conscience. Don't you want that again? Because we could have that again. But in order to have that, it's going to take a lot of courage. Courage from every single person in this room. Courage for me to run. And courage for every one of you to remember, don't complain about what happens in a general election if you don't play in this caucus, because it matters. You look at these general election polls. First of all, the media loves to show you these national polls. Iowans know national polls don't matter. But you look at these general election polls, the head-to-heads. The one thing that keeps me up at night is what happens between now and Election Day. Because we're the weakest we've ever been. And a vote for Joe Biden is a vote for Kamala Harris. And if we get a President Kamala Harris, we are not going to survive it. We all know Joe Biden's not going to make it. So when you look at these head-to-heads, Trump and Biden are pretty much even. On a good day, Trump's up by 2 points. Wall Street Journal, he was up by 4. That's margin of error. DeSantis doesn't defeat Biden. In every one of those polls, most recently the Wall Street Journal, I defeat Biden by 17 points. Can you imagine it not being a nail-biter? Can you imagine? That's not even just about the presidency. That's about governorships. That's about the House. That's about the Senate. That's about all the way to the school board. That's a mandate. That's a mandate to say we're going to get our economy back and we're going to pay down our debt. That's a mandate to say, yes, our kids are going to start reading again. That's a mandate to say we're going to secure our border, no excuses. That's a mandate to say we're going to have law and order again in this country. And that's a mandate that we will once again be strong and proud. When I announced, someone asked me why I was doing this. And I said, you know, my parents came here 50 years ago to an America that was strong and proud and full of opportunities. I want them to know that country again. I'm doing this for my husband, Michael, and his military brothers and sisters. They need to know their sacrifice matters. They need to know that we love our country. I'm doing this for my daughter who just got married, and I saw how hard it was for her and her husband to buy a home. The average homeowner today is 49 years old. The American dream is getting further and further away. And I'm doing this for my son who's a senior in college. And I am tired of watching what he goes through when he has to write papers of things he doesn't believe in just to get an A. That's not us. That's not America. And for the first time, 81% of Americans don't think their kids are going to live as good of a life as we did. We can't be okay with that. I'm not okay with that. We do have a country to save. But I'll promise you this. If you will join with me in this caucus, we can do this. And I promise you, our best days are yet to come. Thank you so much. God bless you. I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, thank you. Y'all sure do know how to make a Southern girl feel good. I appreciate that. We are now going to turn the mics on you and take some questions, but I do want to say this. We are 29 days until the caucuses. And I have seen the commercials you're seeing. The press can vouch. I think I've done over 120, 40 town halls. I've never talked about our opponents because it's about what we get done. But now for 29 days out, if they punch me, I punch back. And I punch back harder. Ron DeSantis, every single commercial he's done has been a lie. That's why he keeps changing them so much, because every time he puts one up, the fact checkers call him out for it. There has not been one ad that was honest. Not one. And now he's desperate, throwing things against the wall. Today he said that I want our troops to be in Ukraine. I've never even said anything like that. Nowhere near it. And he's got commercials saying all kinds of things. So if he's going to lie about me, I'm going to tell the truth about him. He went into D.C. saying that he was going to stop the spending. And instead, he voted to raise the debt limit and hundreds of billions of dollars. He led the charge on banning the renewable fuel standard in Congress. He says he's for energy. Then why did he ban fracking and offshore drilling in Florida recently? And then he's going to turn around and say he's pro-Israel. But you're going to bring the most anti-Israel Republican into this state to campaign with you? He brings the guy, only Republican, who voted with the squad against condemning anti-Semitism on college campuses. The guy voted against condemning those presidents that sat there and said that it was okay. He brought a guy to campaign with him who voted not to take away the $6 billion that was going to Iran. You answered that for me. So if you're going to go and think you're going to win by telling lies, if that's how you're going to win, you don't deserve to win. Because this is a time where we need true contrast, the truth, all the time, and we stand by it. So he can keep hitting, and I'm going to keep winning. And then I heard that Trump is going to go on the attack against me tomorrow. So stay tuned. We'll have fun with that one. All right, now we're going to open it up to questions. There's nothing I won't answer. You may not like my answer, but there's nothing I won't answer. We've got two guys with mics. If you hold your hand up high, they will find you, and we will start the questions. Yes, sir.
Thank you for coming today, Ambassador Haley.
Thank you.
Learned today that our U.S. fighting force is now at the lowest recruitment level in 80 years. With the potential of war in Ukraine and Israel and in the South China Sea, what can we say to our young people that would make them want to join a force to fight for America and perhaps give up their lives for such a thing?
So our military recruitment is down 25%. And this is an interesting thing. 80% of our recruits come from military families. And for the first time in America, military parents and grandparents are telling their kids don't do it. Why? I told you how we treat our veterans. And then, do you think we're having the backs of our military right now? We're not. When you're so focused on making them take gender pronoun classes, and you're so delayed on getting them equipment and ammunition and battle armor that is modernized, that's a problem. I was just at SIG Sauer in New Hampshire. New Hampshire, right? Yes. right, Brian? New Hampshire. And they are for the first time getting the first modernized machine gun in years because of the process. And I got to shoot it before my husband, by the way. It should not be where the military men and women come last. They have to come first. They have to know that we have their backs. They have to have the confidence to know that we're going to give them the skills, the technology, and everything needed so that we can lead the charge going forward, not looking back. That's why it's happening. So what we'll do is, one, we are going to take care of our veterans. Under my watch, there will be no veteran that ever suffers again, because if they're willing to sacrifice for us, we should spend the rest of their lives making sure that we tell them thank you. And then we've got to go back to being patriotic. We've got to go back to loving our country. My husband joined the military after 9/11. We've got to get people to appreciate how blessed we are. My husband would always say, I wish every American would spend one day in Afghanistan. He said, because they would realize our homeless live in luxury compared to what they go through. We've got to understand that even on our worst day, we're blessed to live in America. But the tone at the top matters. And that's going to change when I'm president. Well, hey, little bit. What's your name?
Sam,
Sam, how old are you?
6 years old.
6. Are you in first grade? Are you in kindergarten?
Mhm.
Oh, I love kindergarten. Good. What's your question?
What's your favorite thing to do with your kid?
I love that. So my kids are a little bit older now. They're 22 and 25. My daughter is a pediatric nurse at the Children's Hospital in South Carolina. My son is a senior in college. But we always, when I was governor, I would have dinner with them. We would always have dinner as a family 5 nights at least out of the week. And we would have, on Friday nights, it would be Haley Family Fun Night. And the kids always got to pick whatever it was we were going to do, whether it was a movie, whether it was bowling, whatever we decided to do. So now they're older, but we still love doing the same things. We love getting around the couch and watching movies. We love talking. My daughter and I love to watch reality TV. We talk about that a lot. My son and I always love to see what movies are out there. There's just a lot there, but that's what I love to do. Is anything with my kids makes me happy. Yes. Yes, sir. He won't give you the mic because he thinks you're going to run off with it.
I probably would. Anyway, in regards to what you talked about with education, I'd say I believe another thing is the fact that we've also developed a sense where schools aren't safe specifically for students that feel that there is bullying going on in schools. So I'd say with also in regards to social media and all kinds of different elements, what are your thoughts on helping improve the mindset when it comes to schools to make kids feel invigorated about education again?
You know, this is, it's tough because you look at what social media has done. First of all, I have to make my pitch. I think we absolutely should ban TikTok. We have to get that done. Right after what happened in Israel, you saw all these pro-Hamas videos come out. We know exactly, it's the Chinese Communist Party. Then they go and they put out this letter from bin Laden justifying 9/11. That wasn't Americans doing that. That was totally China. India banned TikTok because of the social disruption it was causing. Nepal just banned it a couple of months ago. Let's not be the last country that figures out this is dividing us. But when it comes to the rest of social media, we've got some work to do there too. When these social media platforms opened up, they wanted freedom of speech. We should always fight for freedom of speech. That's what makes our country great. But they said they didn't want to be held liable for anything somebody put on their platform. And that was fair. So Congress passed Section 230 that said that they wouldn't be held liable. But what's happened in social media now? Now they've decided what's good speech and what's bad speech. So if they change the rules, we've got to pull it back on them and say, wait a minute. The second thing is, every one of you deserves to know what their algorithms are. Why do they push what they push? Why do we see what we see? Why do we see some things and not other things? Americans should know how these social media platforms work for the sake of us and for our kids. And then these social media platforms need to show us how they're dealing with these foreign bots. When I was at the United Nations, Russia, China, and Iran said it was the cheapest form of warfare to do cyber or get on social media. And they would go, and these aren't even real people. These are millions of bots every day spreading disinformation, spreading things on race, religion, and other things to divide our country. They owe it to us to show us. I will fight for Americans having freedom of speech every day. I don't want Russia and Hamas to have freedom of speech. And that's what's happening on social media right now. So I think we need to do, social media, we've opened that door. Once you open the door, you can't close it. As a mom, do I wish everybody would put their name next to who they are? I think it would stop a lot of the bullying. I think it would stop, the child pornography and the other stuff, and it would make it more civil. But having said that, I think that's the first step, is looking at the social media side of it. The other thing is we have to start acknowledging the cancer that is mental health. 1 in 3 people have a mental health issue. But if treated, they can live a perfectly normal life. But what's the problem now? We don't have enough mental health therapists. We don't have enough mental health centers. If you don't get treatment, you can fall into addiction. We don't have enough addiction centers. And if you happen to be lucky enough to get one of those 3, insurance doesn't cover it. And we're seeing more kids now than ever with anxiety, stress, and depression since COVID. So we've really got to focus on the things to get our kids healthy again. And those would be a good start. Yes, ma'am.
This is a hot topic. I want to know your stance on abortion. I already know it, but I think they need to have it shared because you're the only one that makes sense. You're the only one that makes sense.
Well, in all honesty, the fellas just don't know how to talk about it. They just don't. It's no offense, but they don't. So, abortion, pro-life, pro-choice, it is an incredibly personal issue for every woman and man in America. And it needs to be treated that way. I personally am unapologetically pro-life. Not because the Republican Party tells me to be, but because my husband was adopted. And I had trouble having both of my children. So I'm surrounded by blessings. Having said that, I don't judge anyone for being pro-choice any more than I want you to judge me for being pro-life. But let's talk about how we got to this moment. Prior to 1973, we had 46 state laws that dealt with abortion. And in 1973, we had unelected justices that threw out those 46 state laws and said abortion anytime, anywhere, for any reason. Now I think a wrong has been made right. The unelected justices said that wasn't their place, that it should be in the hands of the people. And I agree with that. It should be as close to the people as it gets. Some states have gone more pro-life. I welcome that. Some states have gone more on the choice side. I wish that wasn't the case, but the people decided. So I respect it. But the debate that we're having in this country is there a federal law? Can there be a federal law that deals with abortion? But nobody's telling you the truth. I do think there's a place for a federal law, but in order to have a federal law, you have to have a majority of the House, 60 Senate votes, and a signature of a president. We haven't had 60 Republicans in over 100 years. We might have 45 pro-life senators. So no Republican president can ban abortions any more than a Democrat president can ban these state laws. So can't we find consensus? Can't we all just agree to ban late-term abortions? Can't we all agree to encourage adoptions and good quality adoptions? Can't we all say that doctors and nurses who don't believe in abortion shouldn't have to perform them? Can't we say that contraception should be accessible? And can't we say that no state law should say to a woman who's had an abortion that she's going to jail or getting the death penalty? Let's just start there. I am not going to demonize this issue. We have to humanize this issue. I had a roommate in college who was raped. I wouldn't wish on anyone to go through what she went through wondering if she was pregnant. Everybody has a story. Be respectful of their story. Democrats have tried to put fear in women on this issue. Republicans have used judgment. This is too personal to have fear or judgment, because our overall goal should be, how do we save as many babies as possible and support as many moms as possible? That's always going to be my goal. That's the way I'll deal with it. Yes, sir.
You spoke tonight a little bit about your plan dealing with China and the fentanyl precursors that they've been supplying. What part of your plan in dealing with China would deal with the inroads they've made in securing stockpiles of lithium and precious metals like they've done in Afghanistan, and the inroads they've made into Africa through their Belts and Roads initiative?
So China had, the one thing that China has is a lot of patience, right? And so we saw they started this Belt and Road initiative, and basically what it was they went, and this all was really going when I was at the United Nations. And what they would do is they'd pay for these pet projects that really didn't even mean anything. But they give these countries these pet projects, and the countries saw it, oh, this is free money. But I saw once they gave it, when we would have votes, China went from being a really nice to everybody kind of country that never wanted any confrontation to suddenly putting their hands in people's faces saying, you better vote with us, if they got involved in the Belt and Road Initiative. And now they waited for a time like COVID, when all of a sudden these countries couldn't pay for it. Now you look, and they go to those countries and say, you can't pay for it? Give us your port. Give us your utility. Give us your military installation. If you looked at a map, it would send a chill up your spine at how connected that has all become. They knew the whole time what they were doing. Now with these rare earth minerals, they're doing the same thing. They're trying to figure out how to stockpile. They've made huge inroads in Latin America. They've made huge inroads in Africa. Africa used to have 3 terrorist organizations. Now they have 10 terrorist organizations. The only base that China has off their mainland is in Djibouti, in Africa. They're moving. They're manipulating. They're continuing to do everything, so it's not just their region. It's around the world. That's when I say we've got to wake up. Those are the things we have to do. What we need to do when we look at China is say, okay, let's look at it from a national security lens. If they pulled the rug out from under us tomorrow, would we be ready? Now I want you to think about COVID. What happened? They all told you to put on a mask, right? They were made in China. They told you to take a COVID test. You turned them over and they were made in China. You go to your drugstore aisle, all those medicines are made in China. We've got to get ready for that. And so the way we do it is we get in front of it. It's about building our partnerships. We need to be building partnerships with India, Japan, South Korea, Australia, Israel, the Philippines. We used to have those. We need to go back and solidify those. We can never be so arrogant to think we don't need friends. On September 12th, we needed a lot of friends. But you got to be a friend to get a friend. If we went and started partnering with them, India just gave themselves $1 billion stimulus to become less dependent on China. Japan followed suit, same thing. We need to start making sure that we are partnering with our allies to make sure we have what we need. Not doing what Biden did, sending out all those green subsidies saying that we need to have electric cars everywhere by 2030, 2035. Did no one tell Biden that 70% of those batteries are made in China and that was a windfall for them? You remember the CHIPS Act that Biden just bragged about? saying, oh, we're going to become independent. We're going to start making chips in the United States. And so we gave all this money to these companies. I don't think corporate subsidies are ever a good idea, but what makes this even worse, and I was totally against the CHIPS Act, what makes it worse is he didn't even require those American companies to stop manufacturing in China. So China lost nothing. We've got to look at it is how do we go and change that narrative? Stop being reactionary, and how do we start getting in front of these things so that we have the resources, we have the means, we have the advantage? It's not hard. It's just about being more strategic and not piecemealing. Okay, next question. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question on school funding. I have the unique perception. I live in one school district here. That school district recently asked us as homeowners to build them a new school because they've had 25% of their enrollment come from outside districts and they're overcrowded. I work in the adjacent district where many of those kids are coming from, and the people who are leaving are middle class, upper middle class students, which is leaving us with the rest of the students. 98% of the children at the building I work at are free and reduced lunch. We are above 60% third grade proficient, though, in both math and reading. I, for example, have 5 children in my class who are English language learners, and I have 2 autistic children, and they're cutting our funding because we're losing students. How would you at the federal level deal with that so that every school had what they needed to educate kids?
So you're a teacher. God bless you. So my son-in-law is a teacher. My mom was a 6th grade social studies teacher. And let me tell you, teachers are saints. Because think about what's put on them right now. They have to be the guidance counselor, the nurse, the parent, the pastor, the teacher, and oh, by the way, they have to teach to a test. That's why we see so many teachers leaving the jobs. All they want to do is do what they went to school to do, which is teach kids how to do these basic subjects. They don't want to be all things to all these kids. But when you talk about that, in South Carolina, we had an issue. I grew up in the rural area that didn't have much. So when I was governor, I wanted to find a way, how do we lift up those rural challenged areas without bringing up those good educated areas that we didn't want to change? And so I jumped in, and on top of the reading remediation that we did, I went and really started looking in on the funding formula. And what I found is the Department of Education, they go to these states and they say, if you teach this, we'll give you this much money. If you teach this, we'll give you this much money. If you teach critical race theory, we'll give you this much money. So what happened is the states are now teaching to the money instead of focusing on what we want our kids to learn. That's why when I said we're going to take those federal programs and send them down to the states, because if we do that, we can tailor it better to each state instead of having the feds just treat everybody the same. Because rural challenged areas need more things like infrastructure. They've got to have certain, they may not have internet, or they may not have some other things. So you've got to, but if a governor knew that, if you gave it down and you gave it to the governor and the legislature, they would know every area of what they needed and how they needed it. Now, the other side of it is, I strongly believe that parents should be able to educate their kids in whatever school they should. But if we did that, the focus really should be on how do we get the best teachers, the best graduation rates, the best reading rates, and make sure that those kids that need a little bit more have the support system they need. Because in my town, a lot of them had 2 parents that were working. Those parents would leave and see their child in the morning, and the child would fix their own dinner and go to bed before they ever saw their parents. Those districts need additional support, whether it's studying, whether it's after school, or something else. But a state would know that better than anybody at the Department of Education. That's why we need to send that money down to the states. That's why we're going to tailor it in that way. Yes.
This will be our last question.
Oh, make it a great one.
As a future education student, I'm very concerned about DeSantis banning books. So what is your stance on that?
I think that, first of all, It should always be that the local areas should handle whatever it is. But we don't need any school focusing on things that would be related to gender altering, sex ed, any of those things. And let me tell you where I'm going to. All of you will remember this because she's young. When I was in school, you didn't have access to anything related to sex ed. And you didn't have the first sex ed class until 7th grade. And even in 7th grade, you had to have your parents sign a permission slip in order to do it. And I was the uncool kid in the classroom next door because my dad wouldn't sign it. The problem is we want to make sure that parents don't feel like their kids are vulnerable. Because we know, and you know this too, when kids find out there's a naughty book of any sort, what do? They all start talking about it, right? And they all want to see it. We need to protect our kids from anything that's controversial. If it's not about the basics, math, science, reading, history, arts, any of those things, then we don't really need to have it in schools. That's something that if parents want their kids to see it, they can have their kids see it. We just want our kids to learn the basics and stay close to that. So that's how I feel on that. So I will leave you with this. When I ran against that longest-serving legislator in a primary, people laughed at me. And I got to work, and I earned their support, and we won. When I ran for governor, I told you I was the Tea Party candidate. I ran against a lieutenant governor, an attorney general, a very popular congressman, and a state senator. I was Nikki Who. I had 3% in the polls. I had the least amount of money. But I worked South Carolina like no one else, and we won. When I got to the United Nations, they said I didn't have enough experience. And I got to work, and I took the kick me sign off of our backs. I have been underestimated in everything I've ever done. And it's a blessing, because it makes me scrappy. No one will outwork me in this race. No one's going to outsmart me in this race, because we have a country to save. So if you like what I had to say today, fill out this card. 29 days. If you want a caucus for us, fill out the card. If you want to volunteer, fill out the card. If you just need more information or had a question I didn't answer, fill out the card and we'll get you the answer. But we have an opportunity to do something great together. We can do this. But it requires rallying. And our numbers are going up, and you could make them go up even further. So if you like what I have to say, go tell 10 people. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell them to go to NikkiHaley.com, tell them to come to one of our town halls, tell them more about what we have. Take a yard sign, whatever it takes, do that. If you don't like what I've had to say today, just don't say anything and don't tell anyone you were here. God bless you. Thank you so much.